Hello everyone. We are here today to briefly study some of the existential theories by various thinkers and their influence in the modern world. The summary of the session is given to you. Existentialism is a modern philosophy emerging from the 19th century, inspired by such thinkers as Søren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche. Unlike traditional philosophy, which focuses on objective instances of truth, existentialism is concerned with the subjective or personal aspects of existence. The themes in the writings of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche were developed in Europe, and a modern philosophical movement was born. Existentialism is linked prominently also with such atheist thinkers as Jean-Paul Sartre, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Albert Camus, and religious thinkers like Gabriel Marcel, Martin Buber, Paul Tillich, and Karl Jaspers. A philosophical movement that views human existence as having a set of underlying themes and characteristics such as anxiety, dread, freedom, awareness of death, and consciousness of existence. Existentialism is also an outlook or a perspective on life that pursues the question of the meaning of life or the meaning of existence. It is this question that is seen of paramount importance above both scientific and other philosophical pursuits. Jean-Paul Sartre, born on June 21st, 1905 in Paris and died on April 15th, 1980 in Paris, was a French novelist, playwright, and exponent of existentialism. This is a philosophy acclaiming the freedom of the individual human being. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1964, but he declined it. Jean-Paul Sartre was an atheist. According to Sartre, a belief in God can only ever be a personal choice, which furthermore can and should never be forced upon another person. It is up to the individual to choose the life that they think best. Sartre stresses that a person must fathom and interpret God themselves. For this to happen, he says, man is faced with a choice at every turn. Sartre believed that this allows for man to be in charge of his own destiny. However, he failed to address the idea that to negate the existence of God is to assume that man is left alone without divine help or guidance. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, proclaimed that truth is subjectivity. Human beings can be understood from within their self in terms of their lives and experience reality and dilemmas, and not from outside in terms of a biological, psychological, or other scientific theory of human nature. In the 20th century, Martin Heidegger's notion of being in the world and Sartre's idea of existence preceding essence became two of the most important themes in existential thought. Existential ideas became very influential in areas outside of philosophy, such as in psychology and the popular arts. With complete freedom to decide and being responsible for the outcome of one's own decisions comes anxiety or angst about the choices made. Anxiety's importance in existentialism makes it popular topic in psychotherapy. Therapists often use existential philosophy to explain the patient's anxiety. Psychotherapists, using an existential approach, believe that the patient can harness his or her anxiety and use it constructively. Instead of suppressing anxiety, patients are advised to use it as grounds for change. By embracing anxiety as inevitable, a person can use it to achieve his or her full potential in life. In simpler terms, existentialism is a philosophy concerned with finding one's self and the meaning of life through free will, choice, and personal responsibility. The belief is that people are searching to find out who they are and what they are throughout life as they make choices based on their experiences, beliefs, and outlook. And personal choices become unique without the necessity of an objective form of truth. An existentialist believes that a person should be able to choose and be responsible without the help of laws, ethnic rules, or traditions. According to Sartre, in his work Existentialism is Humanism, man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and then defines himself afterwards. He can choose to act in a different way and be either cruel or good. A central proposition of existentialism is that existence precedes essence, which means that a human being as well as human reality exist prior to any concepts of values or morals. A person is born a blank slate. Humanity has no universal, predetermined principles or ethics common to all of mankind. Since no preformed essence or definition exists of what it means to be human, a person must form his or her own conception of existence by asserting control of and responsibility for his or her action and choices. Consequently, a human being gains his or her essence through individual choices and actions. It is solely through the process of living that one defines one's self. The most important consideration for the individual is the fact that he or she is an individual, an independently acting and responsible conscious being, rather than what labels, roles, stereotypes, definitions, or other preconceived categories the individual fits, that is, the essence. The actual life of the individual is what constitutes what could be called his or her true essence, instead of there being an arbitrary attributed essence used by others to define him or her. Thus, human beings, through their own consciousness, create their own values and determine a meaning to their life. Man acquires no strength from possibilities that were not lived out. Man defines himself, rather, solely on the actions that did occur within his life. It is the sum of one's actions, not one particular action or circumstance, which defines one's human existence and individuality. Human existence is characterized by nothingness. Anything which we claim is part of human life is of our own creation, often through the process of rebelling against external constraints. This is the condition of humanity. Absolute freedom in the world. Sartre used the phrase existence precedes essence to explain this idea, a reversal of traditional metaphysics and conceptions about the nature of reality. And anxiety or even anguish is a term that is common to many existential thinkers. Although its concrete properties may vary slightly, it is generally held to be the experience of our freedom and responsibility. Soren Kierkegaard, in The Concept of Dread, maintains that dread, when experienced by the young child in facing the possibility of responsibility for his actions, is one of the main forces in the child's individuality. Second, bad faith. Bad faith is seen as any denial of free will by lying to oneself about one's self and freedom. The main point is the attitude one takes to one's own freedom and the extent to which one acts in accordance with this freedom. A sign of bad faith can be something like the denial of responsibility for something one has done on the grounds that one just did as one does, or that one's genes determined one to do as one did. The very condition of freedom can be said to be part of any individual's self. The focus on freedom in existentialism is related to the limits of the responsibility one bears as a result of one's freedom. That is, the relationship between freedom and responsibility is one of interdependency, and a clarification of freedom also clarifies what one is responsible for. The third one, responsibility and freedom. If one accepts responsibility, however, freedom is achieved. Freedom and responsibility have a symbiotic relationship in existential philosophy. According to Sartre, all men are essentially free. They are free to make choices and take actions because no a priori morals constrict their individual consciousness. As free beings, humans are responsible for all elements of themselves: consciousness, actions, and emotions. Individual freedom of consciousness, therefore, is both a blessing and a curse. It is a blessing because it offers humanity the gift of freedom to shape one's life and the universe. It allows one to create a personal set of values with no a priori restrictions. Freedom is a curse because the responsibility of shaping one's own life comes along with the freedom to choose. As Sartre is an atheist, he goes a step further and rejects the idea of God. But one has to abandon any concepts which derived from and were dependent upon God. Sartre argues that there is no given human nature common to everyone because there is no God to give. Humans exist and then need to engage with essence and develop, define and decide what their nature will be through their engagement with themselves, society and the nature around them. We are born with nothing, we are nothing. Once man starts taking action, then comes choice. Every person chooses his essence by choosing his actions. Only by living everyday life by making choices, he or she conceptualizes while making choices. Even if one chooses to be quiet, it is an action according to Sartre. If he chooses, it has a value attached to it. Consciousness chooses to value it. Man must form his values through choices and consequently man becomes a product of his choice. Every choice made, then, is the correct choice because it defines one's being. No a priori meaning defines one as a human being. One must create his or herself by the absolute product of his or her choices. When we make a choice, we are responsible to carry out our image. People are responsible for each and every aspect of their selves, consciousness and their actions. Humans in general are responsible for shaping the world around them through choices. Although existential therapy accepts the premise that our choices are limited by external circumstances, the existential position rejects the notion that our acts are predetermined. There are a range of choices available to each of us, and we are free to choose and therefore responsible for our own choices and actions. We must create and live with our own individual freedom. Freedom means openness, readiness to grow, flexibility and changing in pursuit of greater human values. It entails our capacity to take a hand in our own development. Freedom is basic to existential understanding of human nature because it underlies our ability to choose. People are free to choose among alternatives and therefore have a large role in shaping their destinies. With freedom, we must also accept the responsibility for directing our lives. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. Existentialism is a way of existing wherein we inquire into our own existence. Our being is at issue, and so we inquire into the things that have a deep and personal meaning for us. In the pursuit to understand our lives in connection with others, we begin to recognize common themes emerging, such as meaning and importance of freedom, responsibility, death, suffering, guilt, and the place of authentic values in human life. In one's personal strivings to survive, anxiety must be confronted as an inevitable part of the living. Existential therapists differentiate between normal and neurotic anxiety, and they see anxiety as a potential source of growth. Normal anxiety is an appropriate response to an event being faced. To the existentialist, it is important that we be aware of death. The existentialist does not view death negatively, but holds that awareness of death as a basic human condition gives significance to living. Existentialists believe that those of us who fear death also fear life. It is as though we are saying, I fear death because I have never fully lived. A basic goal of existential therapy is to enable individuals to accept their personal freedom. The therapist seeks to help clients experience their existence as real. Existential therapy helps clients face the anxiety of choosing for themselves and accepting the reality that they are more than mere victims of deterministic forces outside themselves. Existentialistic ideas came out of a time in society when there was a deep sense of despair following the Great Depression and World War II. There was a spirit of optimism in society that was destroyed by World War I and its mid-century calamities. This despair has been articulated by existentialist philosophers well into the 1970s and continues on to this day as a popular way of thinking and reasoning, with the freedom to choose one's preferred moral belief system and lifestyle. In films and books of Woody Allen and Somerset Maugham, one of the central issues raised by both is the conflict between domestic happiness and security and a desire to live a more meaningful existence. In other words, personal happiness depends on more than domestic bliss and security. Woody Allen's philosophical approach has always been rooted in the philosophy of existentialism that was in vogue in the 1950s and early 1960s Maugham novel Midnight in Paris and Razor's Edge. Both the movies explore the deep and probing issue of what counts as a meaningful life. John Milton's life, for example, shows a great concern for individual choice, individual responsibility, and the need for people to accept their fate, one which always ends in death. He also considered individuals to be far more important than any system, political or religious. He did not, for example, accept the divine right of kings or the infallibility of the Church of England. In Paradise Lost, Satan is treated with relatively more sympathy because he uses his free will to choose what he would do, stating that it is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. He accepts full responsibility for this, despite the negative consequences. Adam, similarly, does not flee responsibility for his choices. He embraces both his guilt and the consequences of his actions. Existentialist themes and ideas can be located on a wide variety of works throughout the ages. Modern philosophers and writers who identify themselves as existentialists have drawn heavily on this heritage, bringing it out into the open and drawing people's attention. The existentialist psychotherapists are not concerned with the client's past. The emphasis is on the choices to be made in the present and future. This helps the patient to search for a new and increased awareness in present and enabling a new freedom and responsibility to act. They feel they are not any special and that their existence is simply coincidental, without destiny or fate, and they view life as moments in which they are free. There is no existential personality theory which divides humanity into types. There is a description of the different levels of experience and existence with which people are confronted. The way in which a person is in the world at a particular stage can be mapped. We can distinguish 4 distinct basic dimensions of human existence: the physical, the social, the psychological, and the spiritual. At each stage of their life and on each of these dimensions, people encounter the world and shape their attitude. People are pulled between a positive pole of what they aspire to, one dimension, and a negative pole of what they fear. What is physical dimension? On the physical dimension, individuals relate to their environment and nature around them. They have to accept the limitations of natural boundaries, such as old age. Recognizing the limitations can bring release of tensions. On the social dimension, individuals relate to others as they interact with the public world around them. Attitudes can range from love to hate and from cooperation to competition. Sooner or later, everyone is confronted with both failure and loneliness. On the psychological dimension, individuals relate to themselves and in this way create a personal world. Contradictions here are often experienced in terms of personal strengths and weaknesses. On the spiritual dimension, individuals relate to the unknown and thus create a sense of ideal world. People create their values in search of something that matters enough to live or die for, something that may have ultimate and universal validity, contributing something valuable to the humankind. Facing the void and the possibility of nothingness are the indispensable counterparts of the quest for the eternal. In this lesson, we have tried to understand the key concepts of existentialism according to School of Philosophy, and also tried to understand certain key terms and concepts like existence precedes essence and existential therapy. Hope you enjoyed the session. See you again. Thank you.